Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome and thank you for joining us today. The next 2 hours are devoted to learning something more, not just about our world of shoes and chips and sealing wax, but about how, what, and why we believe as we do. A time for the open-minded, willing to challenge some of those old ideas, and you may have to challenge many today, behind what we think we know, who we are, and who we might just become. I'm Eldon Taylor, and this is Provocative Enlightenment. All right, and in our Spotlight of the Week segment this week, we turn to the subject of genetically modified humans. An advisory committee of the Food and Drug Administration recently held 2 days of meetings to consider radical biological procedures that, if successful, would produce genetically modified human beings. Now, I can remember reading a book way back in the early 70s titled Brave New Baby, Promise and Peril of the Biological Revolution. This was the early 70s. The book was by David Rorvik. I was astounded by some of the technological advances and the promise of what was to come. There were critics that compared the book to science fiction more than scientific fact. I recently visited Amazon, however, to see if the book was still available because its prophecies are no longer a prophecy, but a fact. And lo and behold, the book was not only available, it had just recently been re-released in hardback. So what are we talking about here? Well, the genetic alteration of the human condition, of course. Think of it. We can isolate genes now for almost everything, and it won't be long before the almost in that sentence will disappear. So we can target and replace genes that produce disease. That sounds good. Or weaken the human condition in some way. That sounds good. And so on and so forth. The procedures in question are called mitochondrial manipulation technologies. The procedures involve removing the nuclear material either from the egg or embryo of a woman with inheritable mitochondrial disease and inserting it into a healthy egg or embryo of a donor whose own nuclear material has been discarded. Any offspring would carry genetic material from 3 people, therefore, the nuclear DNA of the mother and the father and the mitochondrial DNA of the donor. Quoting from a recent article in the New York Times, quote, "Unfortunately, there are now worrisome signs that opposition to inheritable genetic modifications written into law by dozens of countries, according to our count, may be weakening. British regulators are also considering mitochondrial manipulations, and proponents there, like their counterparts in the United States, want to move quickly to clinical trials." Researchers at Oregon Health and Science University have produced 5 monkeys using one of these techniques. 4 are now adults, and all 5 appear healthy. But we won't know for years, the article goes on to say, how subsequent generations may be affected. And the Oregon Health and Science University researchers themselves report a difference between their experience with the monkeys and their work so far on fertilized human eggs. More than half of the human zygotes had abnormalities not observed in the fertilized eggs of the monkeys. Close quote. All right, alas, assume everything works well, and the science becomes so sophisticated that the risk factor is basically nil. How long will it be before someone decides that irrational thinking, such as that which leads to unscientific beliefs, should be removed? I mean, one day somebody who supposedly knows what's best for all may decide that a gene which tends toward a belief they find unacceptable, say that of a belief in the supernatural, is inappropriate, and just cross that one out of our makeup. I mean, don't you just love the possibilities in this one? It would seem that technology continues to outrace ethics, and if we're not careful, it may well rewrite our ethical standards by all. And it may do so by its little lonesome self without the conscious input from the public at large or the ethicists themselves. Convenience often does dictate our values, and unfortunately, sometimes what sounds really good and may be good in isolated situations doesn't turn out to be the best thing for all. Your thoughts on this one, Ravinder?
Oh, I think it's a fascinating subject. It actually reminded me a little bit of Battlestar Galactica. Remember, they had the 6 forms of Cylons, Well, if you started having that kind of genetic engineering going on, there are certain traits that, the world over are seen to be more desirable. I mean, you get people in Asian countries having surgery done on their eyelids so they have the more Western kind of look. In India, the fairer skin is considered more. Well, if you refined it and refined it and refined it, then you'd end up with just these certain groups of people, just like you do in Battlestar Galactica. And then you could decide that one certain group had defective thinking as well, and maybe they would be shut down totally. I mean, these things sound really far-fetched, but they are things that we have to consider right now, or there won't be any diversity and some of the problems that come along. I mean, you could wipe out an entire nation just because they're genetically the same. The very thing that keeps us strong and
is
keeps
diversity.
us going is the diversity.
Amen, amen, amen. I don't know what the answer is. It is a deep hole. Fact of the matter is, it has great potential and wonderful promise, but we do need to get our hands around this one and get it around it quickly. I agree. All right, every week I read some of your letters as our way of paying respect to the very important role you play in making this show successful. Last week our guest was Marti Scheimoff, and we discussed being happy for no reason. Kathy wrote, Marci sounds both spiritual and practical, which resonates with me. CB remarked, I really liked how Marci handled the hard questions, very quick in articulation, yet one could tell she had to consider her answer. She sounds really stable on her path of beingness. Mark wrote, today's show with Marti Scheimoff was one of my favorites. I thought her ideas on happiness were well thought out. For her, happiness is not an emotion, but a state of well-being. Jeremy wrote, I love your shows and I love your CDs. Well, we're glad you do, Jeremy. Chris wrote, I'm enjoying your CDs very much. Wendy wrote, I want to thank you so much for the help I have experienced through your wonderful creations. I've been trying all my life to better myself and my life using homeopathy and reading self-help books, which gave some help, but only so far. The CDs I have been using have changed me. I am amazed. My husband is amazed. My kids are amazed. I find myself telling everyone about your products, and I want to help others as I have helped them, or as I have been helped. Thank you again. I have trouble reading that letter. I'm sorry, Wendy. That's a wonderful letter, and we greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Lisa wrote, I am noticing while using the Inner Talk Ultra Prosperity CD that I'm experiencing a lot of positive coincidences. I seem to be in the right place at the right time, even in matters that have nothing to do with money or wealth. It kind of works that way, doesn't it, Raph?
It does.
Ganish wrote, I'm writing to thank you for recording Psalm 23. It really helps me to manage my 13-year-old to deal with his challenging behavior. I play your recording before I deal with a difficult situation. I do not know how I would cope without your Inner Talk recording. This is one of the best emotional survival tools I have come across. Thank you for creating such a wonderful recording. Well, you're more than welcome, Ganish. Albert wrote, oh, I love this letter. You ready for this one? I listen to talk radio all day, nearly every day. There are all kinds of hosts and shows, but there is only one Provocative Enlightenment. You have absolutely the best show on the airwaves, barring none. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, Albert, we're thrilled you think so. Okay, that's all the time we're going to take for letters today, but I do invite you to opine by sending your email to eldon@eldontaylor.com or by joining me on Facebook. We can't get all of your letters on the air, but they do impact our programming, and once again, I both appreciate and thank you for your feedback and continued support. Now to this week's show, and do we ever have a show for you today? We will be discussing the book, 47 Billion Years of Evolution. This is what Dr. Stanley Krippner had to say about this book. Quote, suspend your ordinary belief system and plunge into this outrageous book by Barham and Heiby. But the actual authors of this book, we are told, were two materialized, discarnate entities, each of whom appeared with a complete physical body and a working speech apparatus. Once you feel you are sufficiently open-minded to delve into the book's content, you will find a remarkable account of humankind's evolution, past, present, and future. For me, the most interesting part of the book was its spin on biblical stories, early Christian church history, and its discussion of Buddhism. Regardless of the author's origins, this self-styled case report is well written, articulate, and grounded in the existing literature, including research studies on channeling and mediumship. Reading it was a valuable exercise in looking at the universe through a different prism, one that is bizarre and esoteric, but nonetheless coherent, if not always convincing. Close quote. Okay, we have a party today. We have 3 guests joining us, and we'll have a 4th one drop in a little later. Each of our principal guests have a different perspective on the same work, a book whose author crossed over before we could get her to the show. Indeed, we had her scheduled, had to postpone the show, and I'm afraid we missed an opportunity. Nevertheless, we're going to look at this book, and we're going to look at it through the eyes of some experts. The author is a Dr. Martha J. Barham. Dr. Barham was originally booked to the show, as I say, with her friend and editor, Dr. Elaine Heiby. Dr. Heiby worked closely with Dr. Barham and knows the material very well, and she joins us today together with my old friend, neurosurgeon and author, Dr. John L. Turner, and another frequent guest and favorite of mine, Michael Tim. We will also be joined, as I say later, by a special guest who not only knew the author, but participated in some of the sessions from which the content of the book is taken. So let me tell you a little bit about the author and today's guests. Our author, as I said, the late Marti, as she went by, J. Barham, RN, Ph.D., was a registered nurse and licensed psychologist. She practiced as a therapist for over 40 years. Her book is the result of messages she received from 2 materialized beings during seances, or what Dr. Barham termed as darkroom sessions. Now, we're going to focus on 1 book today, but there are really 3. We'll be looking at 47 billion years of evolution. Now, these sessions could take place in front of many witnesses and would last typically 2 hours, generally occurring at least twice a week. Dr. Barham's husband served as the channel. During one session, there was enough light for photographs, which are reproduced on the Facebook page, and I'd encourage you all to go like that page, Evolution and Spirituality. The entities went by the names Anka, I think that's how we say it, but I'll get it cleared. It could have been Anka, and Mario. Okay. Joining us today is Dr. Elaine Heiby. She has been a professor of clinical psychology and a licensed psychologist for over 30 years in Honolulu. She has over 100 scholarly publications. In recent years, her research interests have included the integration of quantum physics as an explanatory mechanism for human experiences that are generally labeled as spiritual or psychic. Again, for clarification, Dr. Heiby worked closely with Dr. Barham for some 10 years or more. They were close personal friends, and she is the editor of 47 Billion Years of Evolution. Also joining us today is Dr. John L. Turner, the author of Medicine, Miracles, and Manifestations, A Doctor's Journey Through the Worlds of Divine Intervention, Near-Death Experiences, and Universal Energy. Dr. Turner graduated from Ohio State University with a degree in engineering physics and continued in graduate school at Ohio State University Department of Physics. 3 years into the Ph.D. program, he was given a book about Edgar Cayce, The Sleeping Prophet. This changed the course of his life. He was excited about the existence of a spiritual world and made immediate plans to attend the Ohio State University's College of Medicine, where he earned his M.D. He completed his internship year in general surgery and his first year neurosurgical residency at Ohio State University. He completed the remaining 4 years of neurosurgical training at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. Now also joining us is Michael Tim, our go-to expert whenever we deal with mediumship. A 1958 graduate of San Jose State University School of Journalism, Michael Tim had 2 concurrent careers after spending 3 years as an officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. One as an insurance claims representative, supervisor, and manager, and the other as a freelance journalist. In his 40-year insurance career, Mike was called upon daily to apply the scientific method by weighing evidence in various types of civil claims and litigation, and to make decisions relative to settling the claims or allowing them to go to trial. As a journalist, Mike has contributed more than 1,500 articles to some 40 publications over the past 50 years. He has authored 5 books: The Articulate Dead, Running on Third Wind, The Afterlife Revealed, Transcending the Titanic, The Afterlife Explorers, the last 3 all published by White Crow Books. All right, on that, let's get them all in here. Welcome to Provocative Enlightenment, Professor Heiby, Dr. Turner, and Mr. Tim.
Hello, Eldon. This is Jack Turner.
Yeah, hi, Eldon. This is Mike Tim.
Hi, Eldon. It's Elaine Heiby.
And how are you all? It's great to have you here, and it's so wonderful that you took turns speaking. I was about to say, okay, so we don't mess up and talk over each other, but that's great. Listen, to begin with, Professor Heiby, let me start with you. Please tell us how you became involved with the book and share with us your personal observations of both the author and the book's content with regard to just how seriously one should maybe take this material, 47 billion years of evolution.
Okay. Well, I actually met Marti, and her prior books were edited by Tom Green, another clinical psychologist. And I met them through our psychological association, the Hawaii Psychological Association. And I knew them for 10 years, just as colleagues, and we became friends. And it took that long for them to trust me enough to share their books that describe the darkroom activities. By the time they did that, unfortunately, Marti's husband retired, so I didn't sit with them to see Asa, and Mario. But I read their books, and as a psychologist, I thought Anka and Mario presented the most brilliant theory of personality I've read. It was intuitively correct, and parts of it, fit the empirical literature on the nature of personality. So it answered questions that material psychologists don't study. They're starting to. It filled in a big gap for me in understanding the human being. I don't know if I answered all your questions. I think you had
that's pretty good. I mean, just so you took the material very seriously. You take this material to be genuine. That's more or less the bottom line.
I knew Marti and Tom were sane, ethical, honest, humble, very intelligent, and I had no reason to think suddenly their books would not be. And I was learned to respect them before I knew about their books.
Right.
And then their books, as I said, intuitively and empirically felt correct.
All right. Mr. Tim, Michael
Yes.
Tim, you and I have had lots of conversations. You are really my go-to guy when it comes to, how credible is the possibility of this psychic event, this materialization, particularly mediumship and so forth. And you wrote a foreword for the book. Let me ask you this then. Bottom line, how seriously do you take this work, Mike?
Well, it pretty much exceeded my boggle threshold the first time I read it, but it's consistent with other types of mediumship, and I have no reason to doubt. I'd met Marti. I didn't know her very well, but I just can't believe she made this whole thing up, and I don't know any other explanation to give to it other than that, it's fact.
Okay. Dr. Turner, let me turn to you now, just again to get this kind of anchored down. You wrote a foreword for the book as well, and I know from our personal conversations that this book had a significant impact on you. I'd like, you to kind of flesh out that impact and tell me and our entire audience how credible you found this book.
Well, I put it like this, Eldon. I had known about the prior work, Bridging Two Worlds and the Silver Cord, and I was really interested in the fact that of the materialized spirits, when I was shown a picture, and this is what we're discussing in the chat room, of Anka, I mean, I said, my gosh, look at that. The skin is black as coal, and the hair is curly and black. And, you know, as an African-American myself, how could I pass up a chance to not only read the book, but to be able to comment on the book in a brief forward? So personally to me, this meant a lot, a chance to do this. However, as I got into the book and realized that this book answered the fourth question for me, the first three, which had been, number one, why are we here? Where do we come from? And where do we go when we take our last breath on earth? I thought I had pretty much covered that when I finished my book 5 years ago. However, the missing thing was, where did this here, so to speak, this universe come from in the first place? And if I may quickly tell you why I was confused about this, as a physicist, you mentioned about my degree in engineering physics, I could understand the physics of how this all came from nothing. And a great book on that, as I mentioned in my foreword, is A Universe from Nothing by Dr. Krauss, who explains that everything that we know could come from absolutely nothing, meaning not even an initial energy source, but from nothing. Well, understanding the physics is one thing, but really trying to say, okay, I fully understand, was difficult for me until this book. Because as the entities lectured and described, it all came from what we know as the source. People call this God, Allah, whatever. But it's the source we all came from. And, you know, we're beings of light, except for perhaps hydrogen and helium. Everything came from an explosion of a supernova somewhere. So we're beings of light. And as they explained, we return to that source. But for me, the key things were... Yes, go ahead.
I'm going to have you hold it there. We have a break coming back, but you know, you had a experience. You had a patient come to you yesterday, and the patient happened to know personally have actually been present during a session. I guess that's where I want to go. So she has seen this manifestation that you just described the photograph of. And you were able to get her to join us today to tell us about the manifestation. So when we come back from the break, I'm going to ask you to tell me, you know, flesh out the story of how you met your patient yesterday, maybe some of the synchronicity, and we'll get her on the air. I'll have our producer raise her up while we're at break, and we'll have her tell us about this black man, Anka, with the curly hair, that you just described to us. All right, on that, we're discussing 47 Billion Years of Evolution, a compelling work by the late Dr. Martha Barham and edited by Professor Elaine Heiby. I want you to check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/evolution and spirituality. There's the photos that Dr. Turner spoke about are there. It's an incredible page. Remember to join Ravinder and her team in the chat room. Go ahead, Dr. Heiby, real quick.
Yeah, I just want to add, there's also a web page, 47 Billion Years.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll give them all of that when we get back. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss what's coming up after some interesting words from our friends.
You're listening to Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor. Do you feel like you've become lost in a funhouse? Only seeing the reflection of yourself, past, future, and present, but unable to find the real you? I invite you to step through the doorway and onto the path leading to understanding of your mind, your choices, and the influences that surround you. Read Eldon Taylor's New York Times best-selling book, Choices and Illusions, now expanded, updated, and revised. It will provide you with real-life examples of how you can break free from your current perceptions and begin your journey to how high is up. Get your copy today from all bookstores or online from Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble.
Close your eyes. Imagine your goals and dreams. What's preventing you from accomplishing them? Most often, we are our own worst enemies. I can't. I'm not good enough. It's time to reprogram that inner dialogue. Replace all those negative self-images with, I'm good. I am powerful. I can do anything. Eldon Taylor's Inner Talk patented subliminal technology does just that. Researched at numerous universities such as Stanford and by governments such as Mexico and Germany, Inner Talk has repeatedly been proven effective at changing your self-talk. Stop imagining your goals and make them a reality today. Visit www.innertalk.com. That's INNERTALK.com. Innertalk.com.
Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
And welcome back. If you just joined us, we're discussing 47 billion years of evolution with Professor Elaine Heiby, neurosurgeon Dr. John Turner, and research historian Mr. Michael Tim. Before the break, Dr. Turner, you were explaining not just the impact of the book, but I wanted you to tell us about this, what I see as synchronistic event, where just before you're going on to the radio show, you have a patient come to you. I don't want to cut you off from the first part, the story of how important the book was, because I know it, it changed your life. So maybe you can finish that and then segue into yesterday's meeting, and then we'll get our special eyewitness up on the air with us.
All right, Eldon. Of course, it's going to be difficult to discuss something that took 47 billion years in just a 2-hour show, but I know you're going to do your best. Yes, I was saying the importance of this book is that these entities explain that this source of everything that we all came from and that we all return to is not an omnipotent type of power that knows everything about everything, because if so, there would be no need to do anything. And everyone has wondered why there is something rather than nothing. It would be so easy not to have all of this energy for us in the forms of pencils and machines and cars and all that. It'd be so easy to do nothing. But this source has to seed life throughout the universe and then give it enough free will to see how it will evolve as part of its own evolution. Now, that all fit in with what I've been thinking, how this all could work. And then as I studied ancient Egypt, and their first god was a god named Atum, A-T-U-M, who created himself from absolutely nothing, and then went on to create everything else. So the whole thing is very fascinating. Now, as far as coincidences and synchronicity, yes, I've finally come to learn there are no things such as coincidences. It seems like every single thing is planned out for us in exquisite detail. And as we talked about this show, Eldon, I told you about this book and how important I thought it was, to me at least, and for everyone. You agreed to have the authors on your show, the editor, Dr. Heiby, who's with us today, who I had a chance to meet, to our friend Michael Tim. I think introduced us, and we've met in person here on the Big Island last year or two. And then Dr. Marti Barham was agreed to be on the show too. And I thought that was going to be a great show. And then when you asked me what I talk about enlightenment as far as my personal experiences, like with John of God and all those things, I said I would rather join these two ladies on the show because I think this book is much more important than anything I've done. I'm small potatoes compared to what we're going to talk about today. And then when Dr. Barham passed away and transitioned, Mike Tim agreed to come on the show. And I think he can explain how this came about. And hopefully, Mike, you can talk a little bit about the vision and all these things. Again, another event that I don't think was just by chance. But yesterday, a patient came to see me that you'll hear from shortly, who we'll call Bobby, who came to see me as I see patients that have been injured in industrial accidents or auto accidents. And she came to see me because of some medical problems, and I don't know how it came up, but as we talked, I found out that, lo and behold, she had been part of those darkroom sessions in the mainland and knew many of the participants. But more importantly, Eldon, she was there to touch, see, and hear these entities. And I think what you're going to hear from her is extremely important to hear.
All right. Well, let's do that. Let's get Roberta Leone, goes by Bobby, I guess, to join us. Are you there, Bobby?
I am.
Well, excellent. Thank you for joining us today. Please describe what one of these darkroom sessions, the seance, was about, what it was that you saw and touched, if you will, please.
Well, I was in one session way in the early 80s, late 70s, and I was invited by Elizabeth to...
This is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And because I had prior experiences and I had shared those with her, that was why I got the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And so because I had prior experiences, Eldon, I really was not a skeptic going in. However, I had never been in that particular kind of environment, so I really didn't know what to expect at all.
Uh-huh.
And so we all just sat quietly, and in a matter of moments, there was what I would call, what it looked like to me, was dense energy. I see that some people have referred to it as smoke or steam or whatever, but that's the best way that I can describe what originally happened.
Okay, now, was it gray? Was it smoky colored? Or when you say dense energy, kind of fill in a visual for me, if you will.
More cloud-like.
Okay. Like a water vapor, okay?
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that would be a really excellent description. And then from that, it was sort of like a rising vortex. And as that rose, form began to take shape. And before you knew it, there was a rather tall figure standing there. And
tall? How tall, Bobby?
Taller than any human I've ever been with.
Okay, like 7 foot tall.
I mean, maybe an amazing basketball player or something like that.
Okay.
But certainly taller than anyone I had ever physically ever been with. And then this form began to make some sounds, and then words were formed.
Okay, now I'm going to have you hold it right there, if you will, Bobby.
Yeah.
So for our listening audience, I have just, I've got a recording that was taken from one of these sessions, and I've isolated just a small part of this energy's voice. And I believe that you're describing to me who is called Anka. Is that correct? This tall figure?
Anka, yes.
Yeah, Anka. All right. Let's let the listening audience hear what this voice sounded like, and we'll come right back to your description, okay? Now, for everybody out there listening, there is somebody that's actually talking before Anka begins to speak, but if you'll hear the difference very quickly.
The moment that truth comes in, you are dead.
I see. But the truth, for me, in that case I described, the truth for me right there is I would prefer to share that.
You would naturally want to share.
I would naturally want to share that. I wouldn't want to eat them by myself.
In a state of love and necessity, love will win through. Yeah. And love knows no gender. It has no preferences. Its only desire is to express, to share. The energy goes out, and it will attach itself to anything that you allow it
to. Okay. Now, please pick it up, fill it in, give us, continue your description, and maybe you can even tell us what we were listening to.
Yeah, sorry. Yes. That was Anka. And I think that from the time that I was there, that's certainly the voice. And there were opportunities for questions and answers, as you heard in this tape that you just played. But there was also teaching that came rather spontaneously. There doesn't seem to be connected to any question or anything that was going on. It was more just a spontaneous teaching of life and life after life and where we came from and why and all those kinds of things that all of these wonderful books that you've mentioned, certainly clarify a lot of that information.
Now, Bobby, you touched Anka. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, actually, Anka touched me.
Describe that for us. What did that feel like? Was it skin? Was it bone? Was it, what was it?
Silkier than skin would be the best way. It wasn't like any skin that you and I have probably ever touched. But
definitely solid.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely, yes.
So, and how did he touch you?
He put his hand on the side of my face. And just
in a caressing sort of touch? In
a very gentle, soft touch on the side of my face.
Like a parent to a child?
Yes, very much so like that, yes.
Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so go on. I'm filling in my own 3D image here.
Okay. At that point, I became very emotional. And it was more from the energy that I felt in that touch that touched my heart in a very, very deep way. And one that seemed to bring all of whatever my unresolveds were as a human being, it seemed to just make them melt away and become insignificant.
Now, you were there. You were there not alone, were you, Bobby? I mean, how many other people were seeing this?
Oh, gosh. Maybe 10?
10. So it was a large group of people, and you're either all having a mass hallucination and or this is really happening, right?
Yes, exactly.
And you've got some credible people there. I mean, some genuinely credible people.
Oh, absolutely, most definitely.
And I mean, some real, okay. So I don't want you to go anywhere. I want you to stick around for a minute, but I want to turn to Mike Tim. Mike, what Bobby just described, the touching, this manifestation, do you know of any other cases of this kind?
Quite a few in the history of physical mediumship, yes. So what she referred to as energy, as you probably know, has been called ectoplasm. Dr. Charles Richet, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and back in the early part of the 20th century, named it. It was also called teleplasm. It was called psychic force. It was called odic force, and so forth. But ectoplasm seems to be the most accepted name, and it seems to come in various forms, for everything from a vapor to a thick milky white paste. There doesn't seem to be a standard form of ectoplasm. Nobody's been able to capture any of it, to test it and find out what the chemical analysis is, because, number one, they're warned that taking some of the ectoplasm could injure the medium, because the medium has to reabsorb this ectoplasm. The medium puts it out, or I should say that the spirits extract the ectoplasm from the medium, as well as from some of the sitters, if they have any available, and it has to return to those people at the end. If somebody captures part of it, it could injure the medium or whoever it's taken from.
if I may, it's like some kind of a subatomic level atoms or something, some energy that they're taking from an individual in order to make a composite manifestation. And if you damage that, you're really damaging a person, not the entity that is manifesting. Have I got that right, Mike?
That's right. And actually, back in the early 1900s, a couple of the researchers did try to capture some of it, put it in a box, but when they opened the box after they got out of the room, it was gone. It had completely dissolved, so there was no opportunity to analyze it chemically, and it's still a mystery as far as science is concerned. But what happens is that the spirits use this ectoplasm to materialize. And it's my understanding that they have to project their image into the ectoplasm in order to materialize. So sometimes there are reports that people have identified themselves as someone. There was one case in which the mother of one of the sitters appeared, and he says, well, it doesn't look like my mother at all. And as it turned out, the mother actually had forgotten what she looked like. I mean, she had to recall what she looked like in order to project that image into the ectoplasm. And before photography and if the person didn't have any fine artwork done of him or herself, then many people didn't really know what they looked like.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why some of these images, the materialized entities, didn't look like what the sitters thought they should have looked like.
So what Bobby is telling us is totally consistent with your literature and your research with regard to what one might expect if this was genuine.
Definitely.
Okay. Let's go back to you then for a minute, Bobby. Okay. Go ahead, Doctor.
I was just going to say, the entity said they use not only the energy of the physical medium that Marti called the channel, but also the energy of people in the group and of the physical environment. And they have a huge committee working on manipulating this energy to create materialization. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, that's good. Mike did cover that he got it from everybody else there, but you didn't say anything about the committee. Okay, Bobby, let's go back. And Professor Heiby, I want to get into the content of the book, but we like to know, who are the messengers, what is the message, and how do we use it? And so right now we're really evaluating, the credibility to what this message is, if that makes sense to you. Going back to you. You're there. You've just been touched. Anka has touched the side of your face like you're a child. You were about to tell us this had an emotional impact on it. Please go ahead and flesh that out.
Yes. Well, as I was saying, that the touch triggered something in me that brought me to tears. And the best way that I could understand that in the moment was that it simply felt that all the things in my life that felt unresolved, or that I had unresolved around, seemed to disappear. Just leave my spirit, my soul, my mind, my heart. And the relief, I think it was the relief of that brought me to tears. I think that most of us humans go through our lives, and we all have unresolved, and we all have things that we need to get in balance with. And so we simply accept that as the human condition. So for me to have all of that simply removed was remarkable.
Now, how long did that condition persist? Does it persist to this day, Bobby? I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes,
so they, it was a one time, and it's resolved, dissolved, whatever is appropriate, and that's a remarkable change then in your life.
A complete change in my life. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't continue in my life and then find that I haven't had an unresolved. However, going back to that experience, it was much easier for me to really release that, really let it go, really not let it hang in there. And because I had a deep soul understanding that it was not necessary. It was not necessary to be unresolved. It was not necessary to hang on. It was not necessary to be stubborn. And so that has created a very happy life for me.
Bobby, as an eyewitness, did you see this occur with other people that were there as well? This sort of thing?
We were all in the room together. We were all having our own individual experience, but certainly...
Was it as cathartic with everybody as with you?
For some, yes, most definitely. For others, possibly not, because I think most of them had been there before.
They'd done their work. All right. Well, you have been most helpful. Is there anything that you'd like to add for our listening audience that maybe, I haven't asked you about your personal experience with this darkroom session?
Well, I think the teaching that I got from that darkroom session was that love is the only answer.
Okay, that makes sense, and we hear that. All right, I appreciate you very much coming to the show. Let's turn now then to the teachings, because what you have here is, we have a vehicle that is that challenges credibility just by nature of how the vehicle comes into existence, and that stops a lot of people from even giving it enough interest to think about reading the preface or the introduction, let alone the entire book. And that's unfortunate, I think. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to lay out in the beginning some credibility. There were some notable witnesses, including Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who Bobby mentioned, had actually introduced her to it. And Kubler-Ross, as most people know, is famous for her work in Death and Dying, and a very credible person. And more about her and the witnesses are available in the book. And I encourage you all to read the book. And I understand, Professor Heiby, that the electronic version of the book is available free. Is that true?
It's available for $2.99.
Yeah, free. Okay, $2.99. The electronic version is available for $2.99. So this isn't a money-making thing. Let's then now turn to you, Professor Heiby, for a minute. You're kind of putting your reputation on the line as the editor and willing to go out and do radio shows and make public statements about everything that's in this book. And I'm sure that you probably have had a colleague or two turn a nose up at you. How are you about all of that?
Well, believe it or not, no colleague has mentioned this book to me. So I've had no reactions, but I also don't advertise it. But you mentioned I have like 100 scholarly articles. I never advertise them either. None of our colleagues do that. Mm-hmm. So if they were aware, yes, they would probably think I lost my marbles. Too bad, good scientist, losing a good scientist. That hasn't happened yet. So it might. And I'm just very confident. I'm 62 years old. I'm a full professor. I've gotten as high in the hierarchy as I can go, unless I wanted to do administration, which I don't. So I have tenure and my job's protected. I don't care what people say or think.
Well,
I've taken controversial positions on other issues. I've gone up against the most powerful senator from Hawaii, Senator Inouye, who you may be familiar with. He's transitioned to. I bucked heads with him on some other issues about psychology, scope of practice. So I'm accustomed to taking controversial positions. I'm not afraid of what my colleagues say if they ever pay attention to my work.
Let me ask you this. We only have about a minute before the computer's going to kick us out. But, I mean, you're going to have students. You're going to have somebody ask you about it. And I'm going to ask you straight up right now. Do you believe that the information in this book, that the way it was delivered and the people themselves is something that we should all pay attention to, we should all read? I mean, are you willing to put your credibility on the line and say, absolutely, when I was translating this, I know these people, this book deserves to be read by all? Quickly.
Yes. I am.
All right. We got the definitive.
Yes, I absolutely am.
All right, we have the definitive, and we also have a heartbreak coming up. I'm going to encourage all of you. I mean, $2.95 or 99 cents is free in my book. You can get the electronic version if you don't get the hardback version. This book will challenge you, but it is definitely worth taking a look at. We're discussing 47 billion years of evolution with Professor Elaine Heiby, neurosurgeon Dr. John Turner, research historian Mr. Michael Tim, and we had a special visit from the eyewitness, Roberta Bobby Leone. We'll be right back after a brief station break, and thank you for listening.